Ego isn't ego. I mean, yeah, Kurt Russell's character from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is technically Ego. You could tell because he's listed on IMDb as Ego, and if you walked into a room with him and you said Ego, he'd probably go, oh, but still, he isn't exclusively Ego. When you look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, most of its characters are direct adaptations of their comic counterparts. Movie Thor is more or less the same as comic Thor. Movie Cap is more or less the same as comic Cap. Well, not current comic Cap, but you get the idea. Movie Ego isn't the same thing. He's an amalgamated character. It seems like in an effort to expand a traditionally one-note villain, James Gunn and company decided to take some of the best qualities from the other characters people speculated would be Star-Lord's father and roll them into one mega character. So I'm going to go through the 5 characters that I think make up the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 version of Ego the Living Planet, and specifically what they brought to the table. Also, it's worth pointing out that this video is going to be full of spoilers for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Pretty much the whole movie, so be aware of that. Alright, the first character that makes up Amalgamated Ego is Ego. Technically, Kurt Russell is playing Ego the Living Planet, and his character does take some things from his comic counterpart. Ego's a bad guy. He hangs out in space. He does turn into a planet with a face on it. Movie Ego is interested in conquering the galaxy, not exactly the same way that comic Ego is, but that is generally a theme of the character, but that's it. Comic book Ego is done. The second character is someone called JSON of Spartax. Now, originally, I wasn't even going to include him on the list. James Gunn said very early in the process that JSON from the comics would not be Star-Lord's dad in the movies. And having seen him in the film, I don't think there's too much connecting movie Ego to JSON. But very recently, I saw a bit of concept art from Volume 2 that had Kurt Russell dressed as JSON and was labeled JSON, so I figured it was worth adding in. In the comics, JSON is Peter Quill's actual father. The short version of his backstory is he's alien royalty who crash lands on Earth, has a short love affair with Meredith Quill, Peter's mom, impregnates her, and then leaves. Then he goes off to be president of the galaxy. He shows up from time to time in the comics as a villain. Him and Peter don't get along. And the story of how Kurt Russell's Ego meets Meredith Quill and then leaves her is similar enough to what comic JSON did that that's clearly what inspired Ego's actions in the movie. Also, JSON is a dick. While Ego's this big, giant, maniacal villain, JSON's much more manipulative, and I think a lot of that subtlety and dickishness carried over to movie Ego. You can blame that on JSON. Alright, then you've got Starhawk. Starhawk was actually in the movie. He's played by Sylvester Stallone. He's in that cameo from the beginning of the movie where he yells at Yondu. Then later he shows up at the funeral and he's in that awesome post-credit scene. So Starhawk's a member of the original Guardians of the Galaxy. They're now known as the Guardians 3000 because in the comics they're a band of aliens from the year 3000. The roster usually consists of Starhawk, Yondu, Charlie 27, Nikki, Aleda, Major Victory, and Martinex, the crystal guy. It's an interesting team. So Starhawk, or Stakar of the House Ogard, has a very strange and specific power. He can fly around and shoot laser beams, and it's all based around his connection to something called the light. Specifically, Starhawk uses hard light constructs to fight, and by tapping into the light's energy, he can fly at the speed of light. And movie Ego is also powered by something called the light. It's some sort of universal force that lets Ego live for a very long time, and also helps him create those weird roots and even balls that he can throw at the sun. Now, the concept of the light is found nowhere in Ego's comic backstory. Starhawk, on the other hand, is even called the giver of light and the light. So I can't help think that movie Ego being powered by the light came from Starhawk. Moving on to the other star, we've got a character called Eros, who also goes by the name Starfox. No, not that Starfox, a different guy. He's actually Thanos' brother, even though they don't look anything alike. And as the story goes, Eros is not interested in conquering the universe like his brother. He just wants to have fun. He wants to go out and flirt with hot alien ladies and just see what happens. That's his whole deal. A lot of people compare Eros to the real-life member of the British monarchy, Edward VIII. Edward was the oldest son, and when his father, the king, died, Edward was next in line to ascend to the throne. But he was in love with a commoner who had been divorced, and the church wouldn't allow it, so Edward abdicated. He chose to live with his new wife instead of being king. He's a romantic. If you've ever seen the movie The King's Speech, Edward VIII is played by Guy Pearce, aka Aldrich Killian, aka the Mandarin. Starfox is like that. He's a fun-loving member of alien royalty who goes around the galaxy and flirts, which is aided by his superpower. Among the normal ones like flight and strength, Eros is also able to make people in his immediate vicinity feel good. It's weird and has a problematic history in the comics, but don't be confused. Eros is a good guy. He's even an Avenger. And this whole sleeping around the galaxy thing has never been Ego's game. That's why I think Gunn and company decided to take Eros's mojo and add it to Movie Ego. It both facilitates Movie Ego's evil plan, but also gives him something in common with Star-Lord, who's also a sort of galactic ladies' man. Alright, last one, and by far the deepest cut. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we've already been introduced to a couple of characters known as the Elders of the Universe. Most notably, Benicio del Toro's Collector from Guardians 1. Also, in the upcoming Thor Ragnarok, Jeff Goldblum is playing another Elder called the Grand Master. Both are these kind of eternal beings who exist to pursue a very specific goal. The Collector wants to collect everything in the galaxy. The Grand Master wants to make everyone fight. Now, there have been a bunch of Elders of the Universe in Marvel Comics. One specifically is named Ord Zions, and he's known as the Gardener. Now, he does what the name suggests. He gardens throughout the universe. He's all about creating natural beauty, planting trees and flowers, and bringing dead planets back to life. Now, not only does Movie Ego also travel around the universe, quote, planting his seeds, he also plants actual flowers on the planets he visits. And those flowers turn out to be weird Ego matter spawn things, but on the surface, it's very Gardener. It's not just that, though. I think the Gardener was an inspiration for Movie Ego based off the fact that Movie Ego looks more like the Gardener than any other character I've mentioned so far, including Comic Ego. The Gardener and Movie Ego both have a full beard, where Comic Ego traditionally has more of a goatee. Movie Ego also wears a real natural outfit consisting of cloaks and that satchel sash thing, and those are all also things the Gardener traditionally wears. I also think there was almost a direct nod to this in the movie. In one trailer, we get a look at a scene that was cut, which features an exchange where Nebula mistakenly refers to the team as the
Garden of the Galaxy.
Guardians of the Galaxy. Oh, why would we be the Gardens of the Galaxy?
Now, maybe that's referencing Peter Quill's father being based on the Gardener. It's a long shot, but James Gunn does love his Easter eggs. So why does all of this matter? Well, I think it teaches an important lesson about comic book movies. Taking liberties with source material is a great way to turn a one-note villain into a complex and interesting character. Marvel gets a lot of heat for its disposable one-dimensional villains, and there are some good ones, but for every Loki, there are plenty of Malekiths and Killians and Caeciliuses. While it is awesome to see something jump right from the page to the screen, it doesn't always create a well-rounded character. And it's worth noting that Marvel may have already learned this lesson. A lot of the MCU's recent villains are both compelling characters on their own and barely anything like their comic counterparts. You've got Ida on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Cottonmouth in Luke Cage, and Zemo in Civil War. And fans sometimes have a knee-jerk reaction to these kind of changes. But we should embrace these looser adaptations because they give great writers and directors the freedom to tell great stories. Kurt Russell's Ego was funny and scary and engaging and tragic and surprising and menacing. He was both relatable and completely alien. Ego was everything you could ask for in an antagonist. He just wasn't Ego, and that's okay. So those are just my thoughts. Let me know if you think any other comic characters made their way into Movie Ego. Like and share the video with friends of yours who like Marvel Comics or saw Guardians of the Galaxy or are just big fans of Tango and Cash. I have a podcast called Mad Bracket Status. We make pop culture brackets. It's fun. If you enjoyed the video, give it a listen. We're on Stitcher, iTunes, SoundCloud, all that stuff. Most importantly, subscribe to this channel. Hit that button. I make more of these. I've got videos about how every Fox movie needs to have a forest scene in it. I've got one about how Spider-Man could have been introduced a little more naturally in Civil War. Finally, you can find me on Facebook and Twitter. I'm at Nation of Nando. That's all I've got. See you next time.